Sometimes you hear of something which is just too good to ignore, and the story of what happened to Mussolini's brain after the end of the Second World War, with it ending up on sale on eBay, is one of those stories. But it's also something much more profound, to do with being human and whether the very bad actions people do are the result of mental or physical abnormalities or something inherent in all of us. Benito Mussolini and his mistress Clara Petacci were captured and killed by Italian partisans in April 1945. Their bodies were taken to Piazzale Loreto in Milan and hung upside down in front of a Standard Oil petrol station, along with other leading fascists. Piazzale Loreto was highly symbolic, as the bodies of partisans killed by the fascists had previously been displayed there. The corpses were kicked and spat upon by a large crowd and, almost unrecognisable, were eventually taken away by the Americans to be disposed of. However, for reasons that are not entirely clear, a sample of Mussolini's brain was taken, probably for research purposes. In fact, this appears to have been part of a concerted plan by the Allies to take brain samples from Nazi and Fascist leaders in search of a physical abnormality which could perhaps explain their actions. For instance, it was widely believed that Mussolini had contracted syphilis, and that his actions could perhaps be explained by that. It's thought that SS leader Heinrich Himmler's brain was taken for examination in the UK, where it may remain to this day. Examinations were also carried out on some of the defendants at the Nuremberg war crime trials, including Nazi politician Robert Ley, whose actions some thought may have stemmed from a plane crash in the First World War. There's something almost touching in the unwillingness to accept that rational people with physically healthy brains could carry out such unspeakable deeds, and to seek confirmation that it was all some sort of aberration. A sample of Mussolini's brain was sent by the US military to St. Elizabeth's Psychiatric Hospital in Washington, D.C., for examination in the months after the war. Sadly, no abnormalities were found which could explain his conduct, as appears to have been the case with all the other Nazi brains examined. The outcome of the investigation was even reported in the Washington Evening Star in November 1945. The psychiatrist who carried out the tests was reported as saying, "His grey matter and white matter could just as well have been that of any reasonably healthy human being, or could have belonged as much to a peace-loving non-fascist as to him." After that, the brain samples were divided into two parts and stored in different medical schools, where they were known to remain until at least 1955. At this point, we need to know what happened to Mussolini's body after his execution to understand what happened next. The Americans, hoping to avoid creating a focus point for remaining fascists, buried Mussolini in an unmarked grave in the Cimitero Maggiore in Milan. However, that was a secret that was never likely to stay secret for long, and the body was dug up by a fascist sympathiser, Domenico Lecisi, and taken for burial in the wonderful Certosa di Pavia monastery not far from Milan, with the support of a couple of sympathetic monks. Lecisi went on to be a deputy in the Italian parliament for the Neo-fascist Movimento Sociale Italiano. Mrs. Mussolini, Rachele, remained loyal to her husband's memory, despite his many affairs, not to mention war crimes, and campaigned for a proper, respectful burial of his body, of all his body, and asked the US authorities to return the samples of his brain. Eventually, in 1966, one of the samples was found and returned, but there was no sign of the other one, which appeared to have been lost. With masterful understatement, Mussolini's daughter, Edda, said, "He had an unusual destiny, my father, even in death." The Mussolini family was ultimately successful in finding a dignified resting place for him, minus the missing brain samples, and the body was interred in the family crypt in Predappio, in Emilia-Romagna, in 1957, in the presence of neo-fascist supporters and salutes. The brain sample, returned in 1966, was placed in a marble box above the tomb. Mussolini's tomb remains a place of pilgrimage for neo-fascists, with a rally being held there on the anniversary of his death on the 28th of April each year, although we shouldn't overstate its significance, as my experience is it's little mentioned in Italy, and I suspect many younger Italians are barely aware of it. The Mussolini family themselves appear to be divided on whether the crypt should be open to the public, and it was closed for several years until 2021, when it reopened. This may explain the unimpressive 3.5-star rating on TripAdvisor. We should probably be grateful to the family of Hitler's half-brother that they appear to have deliberately refrained from having children in order not to perpetuate the unwanted line. And that appeared to be the end of the story, until in 2009 what was purported to be part of Mussolini's brain was listed for sale on eBay for €15,000. Following protests by Mussolini's granddaughter Alessandra, eBay said that the sale of body parts was against its policies and they removed the listing. The seller retreated into the anonymity of cyberspace and nothing has been heard since. The whole episode is, on one level, an interesting, if not faintly amusing, piece of trivia about a part of Mussolini's brain probably still being stored away on the shelves of some American hospital unknown to almost everyone. But it's also a much more tragic story of the futile attempt to explain away the evil actions of the Nazi and Fascist wartime leaders as a result of physical abnormalities and somehow distance them from people like us who could never do such things. I hope you found this video interesting. If you would like to see more videos vaguely connected to things Italian, please do click the like button, subscribe, and do things which are friendly to the all-powerful YouTube algorithm before which we all bow.